happening? Too hot, too hot. Hi, and welcome to episode 24 of my knitting update. And I just burned my hand. Let me put this down before I cause an accident. My name's Luisa, but everyone calls me Lu. And last week I released a video talking about all knitting tools that I would buy again. Some of them are my favorites, some are just really handy and useful when I'm knitting. So in case you missed that video, go check it out. It is linked up here and down in the description below, as well as its sister video where I talk about all knitting tools that I regret buying and what I like to use instead. But today is a knitting update kind of a week and we have a lot to talk about. Today's knitting update is packed. I have two finished objects, one of which is my colorwork sweater. The other is a neck accessory that is ready for winter. I have a sweater whip to update you on, and it's a complete disaster. I'm talking frog and start over kind of disaster. It's making me anxious and it's making me lose my sleep also. But to brighten things up a bit, I also have two new cast-ons that I'm very excited about. And if we've still got time by the end of this video, I also wanted to give you guys an update on my old knits intervention. I don't know if we're gonna have time at the end of today's video because we have a lot to talk about today, but fear not, if I don't talk about this today, it's sure gonna be in my next knitting update. But anyway, let's start with my two finished objects, and I guess we should talk about my colorwork sweater first, because I'm so excited to finally wear it. And this is my Robinia Sweater by Anne Ventzel. Let me show you guys the yarns I chose for this project before I forget. So let me get my yarn basket. I used 4 different strands for this project. For the beige stripe, I used the called for yarn, which is Ysolda Soft. It's this really fluffy yarn, and this is colorway E67. For the beige stripes, for the blue stripes, I paired 3 different strands together. The first one is Ysolda Tweed in the colorway Navy. I just have this tiny bit left over, so no new skeins to show you guys. But this is it, and I've paired it with Fukulana Saga in the colorway 212. I think the colorway name is Blue Navy. Maybe, I could be wrong. And my final yarn is Ysolda Alpaca 1 in the colorway 100. I don't have any new balls to show you either, so this is the best I can do, but like I said, this is colorway 100. Let me put my yarn aside so we can talk about my finished object. I am so excited to finish my first colorwork sweater. At least the first sweater, I was actually trying to get everything right and to understand a little bit more of colorwork knitting. Last time I showed you guys this project, it was missing both sleeves, so I went ahead and did that. So now it is finished and ready to wear. When I started my first sleeve, I picked up stitches around the armhole, and this sleeve has no decreases, it's just a straight sleeve, really large, really big, really roomy, I would say, kind of a oversized fit for a sleeve. But when I first cast on stitches to start my first sleeve, I was thinking that maybe I wanted to taper the sleeves a little bit and add some decreases down here, but if I were to do that, it would disrupt the wavy pattern. I didn't really like that idea, but at the same time, if I didn't add any decreases, the sleeve would possibly be too big for my liking, so I didn't really have a clear picture of what I wanted for the sleeves of my Robinia sweater. So ultimately what I did, well, I just followed the pattern. Go figure, right? I just followed the pattern and I added 1 extra round of decreases here next to the cuff. That's actually the only modification I made to the sleeves. In fact, I did the cuff 3 times because I didn't really know what I wanted. Like I said, I didn't have a clear picture. Usually I do, but this time around I didn't. So when I first followed the pattern for the cuff, it didn't really make any change in terms of sleeve circumference here next to the cuff. It was still pretty open and I didn't really like the look of this sleeve with a really oversized look and a really wide cuff. So I frogged a little bit, I ripped back a few rows, and I added one extra decrease around here somewhere. I really like the fit of it now. It is still quite comfortable around my wrist, but at the same time I get a balloon-like fit for the sleeve that I'm really happy about. This is kind of a one-of-a-kind sweater in my wardrobe. I don't have anything with the same fit or anything with the same look of my Robinia sweater, so I'm really happy to have this in my wardrobe and ready to wear. Just one thing about the sleeves that I almost forgot to mention. Like I said, this sleeve is quite roomy, and I think maybe this is a good idea for a colorwork sweater. I don't really know much about colorwork, like I said, but at least with my Robinia sweater, where the floats are running on the wrong side here, my fabric doesn't have much give. It has almost zero stretch to it. So I think maybe having oversized a extra roomy sleeve is a good idea, especially around the elbow area, so that the fabric doesn't try to stretch beyond its limits and kind of rips or breaks a float or something like that. It will be a complete disaster. So I think the fit is right, and I'm really happy with it, and that's what matters, right? What I really appreciate about the pattern is, can you see here the shoulder? There's this extra wide beige stripe here because it's where the front and back panels meet. So the pattern has you align the drop, let's say, of the beige, the first beige stripe on the sleeve, and I really appreciate that extra attention to the design. It also happens on the other sleeve, of course. So it's the kind of thing that I really like, and I think it gives an extra polished look to a handmade piece. I really like it, and I also was a bit surprised when I started my first sleeve because the pattern has you do some short rows to shape the sleeve a little bit, to kind of angle the outside edge of the sleeve. I've never seen that in any pattern that I've worked until this one. So I actually really like the fit. I will try this on if I haven't showed you guys the b-roll already of me trying it on. Now, when I started my sleeve, I just did magic loop. I don't really like any other method for knitting small circumference. I'm not really a fan of DPNs, so I was using magic loop for my sleeves. When I first started the first sleeve, I was kind of worried that I would find really fitly to do magic loop and also the color work at the same time, but it ended up being pretty straightforward, not really that much work to add color work to the process. So I really enjoyed it, and that kind of surprised me because I felt like I was not going to enjoy the sleeves as much, but I actually did enjoy quite a bit. Since I was worried I didn't have enough of my tweed yarn, I just bound off doing a Italian bind off without the tweed strand. I don't think you can actually see that at all, and I actually ended up with a tiny bit left over of my tweed yarn, but well, so I guess I didn't really need to skip the tweed for the bind off. Well, but it worked, so yeah, not really that big of a deal. I still need to improve my color work technique quite a bit. I still want to understand how color dominance plays a factor in color work knitting, but I already have plans for my next colorwork sweater that I'm hopefully going to cast on pretty soon. So I think I still have plenty of time to improve my colorwork technique. And since this is a finished object, let's go ahead and talk about, let me just put my yarn here, and let's talk about how much yarn I used for this project and the cost of it overall. So talking about yarn first, let me just open my notebook with all my notes. So talking about yarn first, for this Easiger Soft, I've used 96 grams. The pattern calls for 150, so I still have this untouched ball of yarn and a little bit left over of my second bow, but I don't really mind having this much left over because I really enjoyed knitting with this yarn, and I already have plans for my leftovers, but that's a talk for another day. Talking about my blue yarns, for the tweed yarn I've used exactly what the pattern calls for, 200 grams, and for this other one, Saga, I've used 135 grams. The pattern calls for 150. And for my last yarn, I've used 100 grams of Ysolda Alpaca 1. The pattern calls for 100 grams also, but the pattern calls for mohair, and I've used 100% lace weight alpaca, so there's that. But overall, I guess this is the best scenario, in my opinion, for this sweater, because I have a tiny bit leftovers apart from the Ysolda soft. So I'm really happy that I managed to finish the entire sweater without having to buy more yarn. I actually ended up with a tiny bit leftover of my Ysolda tweed. Last time I showed you guys this project, I mentioned that I was worried I was maybe playing yarn chicken, and I guess I was, because I just have 7 grams left over of this yarn. So I am extra happy that I managed to finish this sweater without having to buy an extra skein of Ysolda tweed, because to be honest, I don't think I'm going to work with this yarn again. Not because of the yarn, but I don't think tweed yarn is for me, or at least not for now, unless a project, a pattern really inspires me to work with tweed yarn. But anyway, that's it when it comes to how much yarn I've used for this project. Now, talking about the cost, I've paid 90 euros and 41 cents for the yarn, and the pattern cost me 8 euros and 37 cents. So in total, this project cost me 98 euros and 78 cents. And I am really happy with the price point of this sweater. I've played around with the yarns when I was choosing the yarns I wanted for this project, when I was trying to bring the cost down, and this was a very successful project and very successful alternatives for the call for yarns. Yeah, this is my Robinia sweater, my first colorwork project, and now let's change things up a bit. And it's time to talk about my second finished object, and I finished my Solange Scarf, also by Anne Ventzel. I didn't realize that when I cast on these 2 projects on January 1st, but it is done. It is ready to wear while it's still cold outside, so I'm extra excited about that. Let me show you guys the yarns I chose for this project. This pattern is written for a DK weight yarn plus 1 strand of mohair. I used fingering weight plus mohair. So my fingering weight yarn is BC Garn Bio Shetland in the colorway 56. It's this lovely green, and I paired it with Lana Grossa Silk Hair in the colorway 178. This beautiful mossy green. This is my yarn combo for this project. I really enjoyed these 2 yarns together, and I really loved this Lana Grossa Silk Hair. It was my first time knitting with this yarn, and I am certainly going to work with it again. But talking about my finished object, I just followed the pattern. Well, kind of. When I cast it on, I was following the instructions for the smallest size. I think it's size 1 in the pattern, but I added 1 extra set of increases to the first tip to get the same width for the main part of this shawl. But when I was ready to start the second tip, I felt like it was maybe too short when I tried it on. Let me do it. Oh, I still have my, oh yeah, that's actually quite interesting. So last time I showed you guys this project, I was here where this orange marker is, and I said that I had around 10 to 15 centimeters left to work on this shawl before I was ready to start the second tip. And this is how much I've actually added of length to this project. Well, now you can see the marker here. So I added quite a bit of length to it before starting the second tip. But here's why. When I tried it on the first time, when I felt like I was ready to start the second tip, this shawl was looking kind of short around my neck. I didn't really like the look of it. So now I added around 20 centimeters on top of the final measurements of the pattern, and now I'm really happy with it. My hair is getting in the way, but let me show you. I don't think I need to stand up, or maybe I do. Let's do it like this, but my pins are stuck. Let me do it like this. Can you see? Oh yeah, you can see. So the reason why I added length to this is I wanted the little knot here in the front. I just really liked the look of it. I don't actually have any shawls with this little knot on purpose. I usually have to tie a knot because I needed the shawl too long. So I need the tie to make it shorter and more manageable. So this time around I wanted a tie on purpose. So that's what I have here. And I'm really happy with the final look. I think the ties have just enough length to make it look intentional and not really a mistake, which is kind of my go-to look for shawls. Not because I want to, but because I always make a mistake in terms of length. So, oh, and one thing that made me really happy when I finished this and took this off my blocking mats, I actually know how to style a shawl and how to wear a shawl or scarf, and I just need to follow the pattern measurements. Who would have thought? I just needed to follow the instructions. But this is it, just one last time so you guys can see. I really like it. I also think blocking a shawl makes a lot of difference. When I was working on this, the ends, there's an I-cord running on the side, on both sides of the scarf. So when I was working on it, the edges were curling quite a bit, so it blocked out pretty nicely. This is my final fabric. I really love the color and the softness of this fabric. At least so far, I don't think I'm going to have any issues in terms of itchiness. Because of the mohair, that's what I'm concerned about when it comes to itchiness, but I think so far so good. Let me just remove this stitch marker. And since this is also another finished object, let's go ahead and talk about how much yarn I've used and the cost for this project. But I need a sip of tea. So when it comes to yarn, I've used 103 grams of my fingering weight yarn. The pattern calls for 250 grams of DK weight. And for the mohair strand, I've used 67 grams. The pattern calls for 75 grams. I'm almost certain the numbers I'm giving you when it comes to the code for yarn is regarding the biggest size. If I compare my final measurements, it's kind of closer to size 2 than size 1. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. Anyway, I've used a little bit less than what the pattern calls for. I've used around 100 meters less than what the pattern calls for if I convert grams to meters, but I'm really happy with the final look. I have a lot of yarn left over, but I bought extra because I want a matching set of hat and scarf. This is one of my cast-ons, but we'll talk about that when we get to the cast-ons. For now, let's talk about what the cost for this project. I've paid 38 euros and 89 cents for the yarn. I'm only talking about the yarn that went into this project. I'm not talking about my leftovers. And I've paid for the pattern, which cost me 5 euros and 58 cents. So in total, this project cost me 44 euros and 47 cents. And I'm really happy that I finally have a scarf, a neck accessory that I love, that I really enjoyed the process when I was working on it, and that I actually know how to wear and how to style. But those two are my finished objects for today's knitting update. So let me give you a sweater whip update. I think it's time to talk about the disaster that is my sweater whip. Let me just change things up here. So this is my Afra Sweater by Irene Lin. Before we get to the disaster that is this sweater, let me show you guys the yarn I'm using before I forget. So I'm using Drops Flora in the colorway 07 here, this lovely medium beige. This is fingering weight, 65% wool, 35% alpaca. I'm really happy with the fabric and the color. I still don't think this color suits me very well, but at the same time I really like it, so I'm just going with the flow, and whatever happens happens. Talking about the disaster now, when I was editing the footage of my last knitting update, I noticed that this sweater was kind of looking small. I don't know if you guys noticed that also, but to me it was kind of looking small, and I'm talking I needed to go up a size, kind of small. So first of all, I panicked and I stopped everything. I did a knit project block, and it helped. It got me around 7 centimeters around my bust area, but I still don't think it's enough. So my first idea was to add a few increases here right under the arm. That way I could have a larger bust circumference of sorts. It wouldn't be the best solution, but it would be the easiest one. So this was my plan until I showed it to my mom. And she also agreed that it was kind of looking small, so she advised me to just put it on hold, the stitches on hold, and start working on the sleeve. So that's what I did. So what I have here, I did actually the entire I-cord for the neckline. There's a bit of fabric puckering here, but I guess this would block out eventually. So I just followed her advice and started my first sleeve. That's what I have here. I just finished the V thing design going on here on the sleeve. This sleeve is kind of a little bit above elbow length. So yeah, if I'm talking about the sleeves, there are also a few things I wanted to change, and I'm also not really happy with the fit of this sleeve. So I decided that I'm going to frog everything and start over. Why? Well, for a couple of reasons, a few reasons actually. First of all, it's too small. I need a larger bust circumference and closer to my hip. I think it's going to be a little bit tight, kind of. It's not really the fit I had in mind. I want more positive ease with this project. So that's reason number one. Reason number two, I think the neckline is a bit tighter than what I would like. The fit is fine. It goes through my head just fine. I don't even have to take off my glasses to put it on or anything like that. But I would prefer a more open neckline. That's the idea I have in my mind. So that's reason number two. Reason number three, I'm not really a fan of the fit of the sleeve. I have a bit of positive ease with the sleeve, but it's not even close to the balloon effect from the pattern photos. I don't need my sleeves to be so oversized as the pattern photos, but I would like to have a little bit more of positive ease. And I guess my final reason for frogging this is I also don't like where the deepest point of this V shape here hits my arm. Right now it sits a little bit higher than my elbow, and I think it looks better, or at least it's the idea I have in mind, if it hits like kind of just below my elbow but not that close to my wrist, kind of like maybe here. So this is my elbow. I guess it's a better way to show you. So kind of like here maybe. Is this making any sense? I don't know if it is. Should I try this on? I feel like I should. Okay, let me try this on. Here it is. My Afra sweater. Let me get the chair out of the way. and show you all sides before I start talking about the problems. Can you see? I have a little bit of positive ease, but it's kind of not enough. I want something a little bit more relaxed around my torso. Yeah, I'm not really a fan of the fit. I also think, since we are talking about things I want to change, I also want to take advantage of the whole frogging and starting over situation to start the detail here on the body maybe a little bit lower, because right now if I were to finish the twisted rib section, I think this sweater would maybe be kind of cropped, and I want something that hits me kind of here maybe. So I guess I would start this design a little bit lower. Can you see the neckline? The fit is good. Like I said, I can put it on and take it off quite easily without any trouble, but I would prefer, let me sit. I would prefer a more open of a neckline maybe. And the sleeve also, I have positive ease on the sleeve, but it's not even close to what I would call a balloon sleeve. Yeah, not really a fan of that either. Oh, and also where the V, the point where the two diagonals meet, here you see it's kind of above my wrist, my elbow, and I don't know, I think it looks better when it ends kind of here maybe. So it has a more dramatic, I would say, design. I don't know. I'm just not feeling it. I did a lot of math. I'm just going to sit with this on. So I did a lot of math. I went to sleep at 2 o'clock in the morning because of this sweater last Thursday. So I came to the conclusion that I'm going to frog this, and since I'm starting over, I'm going to make quite a few changes. I want to start this little design here on the sleeves a little bit lower, kind of like here maybe, and I want to add more stitches to the sleeve, to the stockinette section of the sleeve. That way I will be able to make this deepest point of the V go all the way down here below my elbow. I also want, like I said, to lower this final section of the body a little bit. And since I'm starting over, I also think I'm going to shorten the yoke a little bit. So I'm going to divide for body and sleeves a little bit sooner. Since I'm going to size up in the pattern, the depth of the yoke was going to be too much for my liking. So yeah, that's also a reason why I want to shorten the yoke. And I also think going up a size is going to open the neckline a little bit. So yeah, I think it's going to be worth it, but it's certainly going to be a lot of work. So now let me take this off. This is the disaster that is my Afra sweater so far. And there are a few things that I would like to change when it comes to this project. So the bust circumference, the fit of the sleeve, the fit of the neckline, also where the design on the sleeve is ending. So such small things, but so many things at the same time that I think it's worth it to just frog and start over. I think this project is going to benefit a lot from that decision. So yeah, this is my Afra sweater so far. I wasn't expecting as much trouble when I cast on this project. I was expecting a little bit of extra work because of all the twisted rib accents and things like that, and design overall, but I was not expecting to frog this thing and start over again. But I guess that's part of the process, and believe it or not, I'm still very much excited to work on this. I've made a lot of math to figure out my stitch count, my future, let's say, stitch count, and when I want to divide for the sleeves, when I'm going to start the design element here on the sleeves. So I have it all figured out, and if everything goes according to plan, I think this is going to turn out pretty nicely. But this is my Afra sweater so far. And now let's talk about good things to brighten the mood a bit. And let's talk about my two new cast-ons. So the first thing I cast on is the matching beanie for my Solange Scarf. And I have it here. I decided to cast on a Musselburgh Hat by Ysolda Teague. I know it's not going to be a perfect match for my Solange scarf because of the texture from the scarf, but at the same time this scarf has columns of knit stitches, so I think having a all over stockinette hat is going to pair really nicely and it's going to work as a set, or at least that's what I hope and what I think it's going to happen. I don't know, let me just put my scarf over there. So like I said, I decided to cast on a Musselburgh hat and I'm using the same yarns from my Solange Scarf. So BC Garn by Shetland and Lana Grossa Silk Hair. This is my first time adding mohair to a hat, so I'm very excited to see how it's going to feel next to skin once it's done. But to prevent any itchiness, I'm just going to work with these two strands and add mohair to the outside layer of the Musselburgh hat and to the brim. I'm not going to work with mohair when I start the inside layer, let's say, of this hat, just to be on the safe side, but this is what I have so far. I am using smaller needles. This is a size 3.5 millimeter or a US size 4. I worked on my Solange scarf using a 4.5 millimeter, so I decided to go down 2 needle sizes just because I like a very close, let's say, fabric for my beanies. I just think it provides extra warmth and I really like the look of it. What I'm doing is I'm following the measurements of this Musselburgh I have. I've already attached a few stitch markers to make sure I have the same dimensions, but so far so good. This is my go-to hat every time I need one when I'm going outside. Really comfortable, I really like the fit and the look of it, so I'm just following the same measurements for my new mohair edition of my Musselburgh hat. But this is what I have so far. It's just a really everyday piece and I think I'm going to wear this a lot. Now, since I decided to size down my needles, I'm a little bit concerned when it comes to the fit of this hat because I really enjoy a slouchy hat, a slouchy fit, not really that much slouch, but just a little bit, and a really wide brim. That's my favorite fit for a hat. But with this fabric being kind of, well, the gauge is a bit tight, I would say, for a fingering weight plus mohair worked on a 3.5 millimeter. So I don't know if the fabric is maybe too dense for a hat. Is it going to give me a weird fit? I don't know. Maybe I could try this on. If I don't have any slouch, this is the fit. I hope you guys can see. I think the fit is good, but I'm not really a fan of this roundness here. I like a little bit of excess of fabric here, but I don't know, is this a weird fit, a weird looking hat, or does it look okay? I don't know. I tried taking a few pictures to see how it looks, but I don't know, I'm not really sure, I'm not really sold on the fit of this hat. I'm just going to keep working on it and see what happens. I think it's going to be okay. This is also unblocked, and I know from my Solange scarf that this fabric, this yarn combo really softens up with blocking, so maybe that could change the fit a little bit. I don't know, but we'll see what happens. There's also one thing that is making me want to experiment with my knitting once again, and that is the increases. So when I'm working on raglan sweaters, when I'm doing any kind of increases where you increase every other row, my increases don't really look as neat. This hat is worked from the top down, so I'm just going to show you like this so you can see the fabric grows to here. So this side My increases don't really look as neat. You can see one stitch is kind of bigger than the one below it. On the other side, where I do a what? Right? No, a wait, I'm lost. Okay, when I do a right leaning increase, which is this one here, it looks good, but when I do a left leaning increase, the stitches don't really look as neat. So this is making me kind of want to experiment with different increasing techniques to get a neater looking left leaning increase. I don't know. But this has been crossing my mind ever since I cast on my Musselburgh, but we'll see what happens. We'll see if I will experiment with increases or not. I just hope I don't get any itchiness with mohair, but at the same time I really like the fuzziness the mohair adds to the fabric. And I think this yarn really shines, this BC yarn by Shetland really shines in a stockinette fabric, because you can see the color isn't very well even. I would say it has some variations. Fabric really lets this yarn shine, so I'm really happy with it. But yes, this is my new cast on, really simple everyday piece, and I think I'm going to wear this a lot once it's done. But now let's go to a more exciting cast on, and let me just put everything here. It's a mess around me right now because I have so many projects going, but I decided to cast on another sweater to replace my finished Robinia sweater, and it was finally time to cast on a Salty Days sweater by Veronika Lindberg, or Kutova Kika. I have, or I had, I should say, a Salty Days sweater that ended up kind of small. Well, kind of, not kind of, really small, and I frogged that sweater. So I don't have any Salty Days sweater in my wardrobe. I've worked on a second one, but it was a gift for a friend, so yeah, that doesn't really count. So it was finally time to cast on my corrected version of the Salty Days sweater. I'm not going to put on Margot, my mannequin, because it's at that awkward stage where you can't really see what is happening. But the yarn I'm using for this project is two new to me yarns actually. This pattern is written for a DK weight strand plus one strand of mohair, and I am using this also Lana Grossa, but this one is Uni Meilenweit Uni. I never know which comes first, but this is colorway 1380, this dark pink that I am absolutely in love with, and I am pairing it with Concept by Katia 50 mohair shades as my, you guessed it, mohair. And this is colorway 39. Yeah, this is my first time using this mohair, and I was surprised when it arrived, because I read the label and it says it's 67% mohair, 30% polyamide, and 3% wool. I've never worked with mohair that doesn't have any silk in it, but we'll see. I am surprised, but in a good way, with this yarn, at least so far. If we look at the fabric before I show you guys the project, so this mohair doesn't have a lot of fuzz. Let me see if you guys can see, maybe if I do it like this. It doesn't have a lot of fuzz. So yeah, sometimes that's good, so I'm really excited about it also. And like I said, this pattern is written for a DK weight yarn, and I wanted to use this one, which is sock yarn. This is 80% wool, 20% polyamide, fingering weight. I didn't realize that when I chose this yarn for the project, so I'm just holding it double. So yeah, I'm working on this project with 3 strands of yarn, so not really ideal, but at the same time not as fiddly as I first imagined. So now let's talk about the project. What I have here is a back panel done, and I've already finished the first shoulder. So now I have to pick up stitches on this slanted edge here to start my right shoulder. But let me show, maybe if I show you guys like this, you can see. Right now it's not looking as neat, this 2x1 ribbing, because this is my second version of the back panel. I made a swatch, I blocked my swatch, I did everything according to the book. And when I cast on my back panel and finished the back panel, actually, I felt like it was looking too big. I wasn't really sure when it came to the sizing. So I decided to block my back panel, and it was in fact too big. So I frogged the entire back panel and cast on with a smaller needle size. I usually have to go up 2 needle sizes to get gauge when I'm working on a Veronika Lindberg pattern. So I just went ahead and cast on with a size 6mm. The pattern calls for a 5mm, but it ended up being too big. I was going to have more than 20 centimeters of positive ease, so not really the look I had in mind. So I decided to cast on the same size in the pattern, but I sized down my needles to a 5.5mm. This is US 9, and this is what I have here. That's why I'm assuming the back panel doesn't really look as neat, because this yarn has been knitted with and blocked. So I'm hoping everything will look a little bit neater once it's been blocked. But I really like this pattern. There are a few things I know I'm going to change. I changed a lot of things actually when I worked on the gift knit, my gift salty days, and I think everything worked pretty well, so I'm just going to keep the same modifications for this one. But one thing that I've already modified when it comes to the pattern is when I'm working on a back panel that calls for this slanted edge here for the shoulders, you are increasing, or at least with this pattern, you are increasing on every row. So that gives me a pretty tight edge here with zero stretch, with zero give to it. And when I worked on my first iteration of this one, the one I frogged, this edge was so tight that it was actually curling and doing something like this. I didn't really like the fit, I didn't really like the look of it. I felt like my arm movement was restricted because of this really tight diagonal here on the side of my shoulder, like here. I didn't really like the fit of it, I didn't really like wearing it. So I developed a little trick. I don't know if this is pretty standard or not, but I've never seen anyone mentioning this. I talked about this in my favorite knitting tips and tricks video, but I just did the same thing I talked about in that video. So when I was working on the back panel, when I was increasing on every row, I just added one yarn over before starting each row, and at the end of the row, when I encountered the yarn over from the previous row, I just dropped that off my needles just to give the edge a little bit extra yarn, to add a little bit of elasticity to this edge. What that gives me is a pretty ugly looking edge. Let me see if I can show you. If you hear any noise, it's my needles hitting my desk, but that gives me a pretty ugly looking edge. This is the wrong side. Let me see if I can hide my face so I can focus on the fabric, and this is the right side. So yeah, pretty ugly looking, but when I am ready to pick up stitches to start the shoulder, which is what I have on the other side, I just showed you guys this edge. So I fix the little ugly looking edge when I pick up stitches to start the shoulder. So I pick up stitches the usual way, but when I'm working on the first round on the right side, I need each stitch on my needles together with one of the legs of this ugly looking edge, so that eats up a little bit of the excess yarn that I have in this area. So it fixes the ugly looking edge. Let me show you guys. You can see this kind of neat stitch column, which is from the back panel, and the pearl bumps are from my shoulder fabric. So the look of it is pretty normal and really neat. This is the wrong side. There's something here, but This is the wrong side. Nothing really special, but I still have a bit of stretch on this edge because of the yarn overs I did. So I really enjoy this. I think the fit is much more comfortable with this little bit of elasticity, I would say, in this area. So yeah, this is my salty days so far. I really love it. I already know how this is going to turn out because, like I said, this is my third time knitting this pattern. Really quick project, really easy, really relaxing. I'm not expecting to encounter any issues or any problems with this project, but yeah, this is my last cast on of today's knitting update. I still have to update you guys on my knits intervention projects, my old knits intervention I mean, but I think today's episode is getting pretty long, so I think I'm going to leave for next week's knitting update. Yeah, I won't forget, I promise. I will leave this right over there so that I don't forget to show you guys everything. But yeah, I think I'm going to stop today's update here, and yeah, that's it. So thank you so much for watching today's video. I really enjoyed showing you guys how that's been happening on my needles at the moment. Thank you so much for watching and spending some time with me. If you liked today's video, don't forget to subscribe, give this video a like and ring the bell. It really helps the channel and I really appreciate, and that way you never miss a new video from yours truly. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye!